Hey guys, welcome to Travel Feels. Today I want to talk to you about cinematic movement. Movement is one of the best ways to make your footage look more interesting and more cinematic. But there's so many different stabilizers that you could choose. It's hard sometimes to know which one you should go for. Sometimes I'm filming handheld, sometimes I'm on a monopod, at other times I'm on a gimbal or Steadicam. And each one of these conveys a certain motion and has a certain look to it. So this tutorial will be part one of cinematic movement, where we actually look at the different camera stabilizers and support systems. We're gonna go through some examples of what it looks like to film handheld, with a monopod, a glide cam, and a gimbal. And we're gonna see what it looks like and what it says to the viewer. First up, we have handheld. The handheld look is usually used for more chaotic scenes or just for a more raw feel. So for example, a lot of action scenes are a little bit shaky handheld. If there's a really emotional moment, maybe you'll go handheld to just make it feel a little bit more raw. But it can also be a little bit too distracting. Let's say you're doing a dream-like sequence in your film and it's handheld and shaky. It doesn't really fit that dream-like quality. Or if it's a really happy moment in a film, then having that handheld look might feel a little bit out of place for that scene. And remember, the heavier your camera is, the nicer your handheld look is gonna be. With DSLRs just by themselves, it's really hard to get a really nice handheld look. But you can fix a lot of that by using something like a shoulder mount, which will keep it a little bit more steady, but still have that handheld look. Or you can use something like this, which is an easy rig, which is basically just like a backpack that you put on, and then you would attach your camera here, and that way it just gives you a little bit more stability and cuts out a lot of that micro shake that DSLRs get. That's really just ugly and distracting. So the handheld look is great for some circumstances, but you don't want that micro jitter, that micro shake. That's just not very nice looking in any situation. So use something like a shoulder mount or an easy rig. Next, let's look at the monopod. A monopod is just like a tripod, but it just has one leg, and you would attach your camera on top here. And basically it's really similar to the handheld look, but there's no up and down movement. There's only a little bit of side to side. So I like to think of this as kind of an in-between a tripod and a handheld look, where you're still getting some of that raw feel, but it's a little bit more controlled and a little bit more stable. With a monopod, you can also do some side to side movement, but you're a little bit limited just because that leg is planted to the ground. So at some point it starts to tilt a little bit too much, and then it goes a little bit too crazy. But it's a really cool movement that you can do with the monopod. I also tried some shots just by carrying the monopod, and I wanted to see if it's any better than just a handheld look, the camera all by itself. And it cuts out some of the shake, but it's still pretty shaky. It's not really meant for that kind of thing. But it's good to know that you could do something like that also. Again, the monopod is great for getting just a little bit more emotion and a little bit more raw feeling to the footage. For example, if you're doing a sit-down interview and it's a really emotional story, then maybe you want to film it on a monopod and get just a little bit of movement to just convey some of that emotion that's going on, instead of a locked off, stable shot on a tripod. Next, we're going to take a look at the Steadicam and gimbal. Both looks are very similar, I think. But there are subtle differences. I think the gimbal look is a little bit more robotic and clean. Both of these tools are great ways to get cinematic movement. I love especially the long takes you can do on a gimbal, and you just keep moving and moving into different situations and have different things happening on screen. The gimbal is almost like an all-seeing eye. I think of something like David Fincher's films where it just kind of swoops through, and it's almost like an omnipresent camera that can just go anywhere it wants. So the gimbal or Steadicam is a real clean, smooth look. So it's perfect for those times where you don't need that emotion or raw feel and you just want to show something in a cinematic way. It's also perfect for making someone look like just a boss, a really strong, solid character. So I'd say gimbals are a little bit better than Steadicams, but gimbals also have their downsides. Gimbals can cause a lot of headaches, there can be a lot of issues with gimbals, whereas the Steadicam's always just gonna work because there's no electronics in it. And I'd also say that gimbals are a little bit harder to balance because there's so many points that you have to balance, whereas the Steadicam only really has 2 axes that you have to balance, so it's a lot easier and faster to use, and just more reliable. So when you're thinking about what kind of stabilizer you should use for your film, think first about what kind of emotion you want to convey, or what are you trying to tell the audience through that movement. And then once you figured that out, then choose whether it's the gimbal or the monopod, or you need handheld for that scene. But don't just shoot everything on a gimbal just because you think it looks cool, or you just have one so you think you have to use it for everything. Think more about what's going on in this scene and use the best tool for that scene. Sometimes you also have to think about things like budget and time constraints. Something like a gimbal can take a lot more time to set up and use, whereas a handheld setup you can really move around quickly and get a ton of shots. So for example, a lot of documentaries are shot handheld or on a shoulder or easy rig, just because you need to be able to move around and get all those different shots. Whereas if you were filming on a gimbal and something went wrong, well, you can't get that moment back, so it's more important that you get those moments than getting some smooth movement during that shot. Next time we talk about cinematic movement, we're actually going to go into the different types of movements you can do using these different kinds of tools in order to make your films look more cinematic. I hope you enjoy this tutorial, and make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm really loving all the support that the channel's getting. It's just making me want to do more and more of these for you guys. So thanks a lot, I really appreciate it. That's it for me today. Enjoy the filmmaking process and go make some travel memories.